Hi readers, Chris here. Today I'm going to be doing a full-length review on Ruin and Rising. This is the third book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and because I did a full-length review for book 1 and book 2, I figured I had to do it again for book 3. I'm going to be talking about the same 3 things I always do: world building, characters, and plot. And then at the very end, I am gonna talk about a few spoilers. So I will warn you before that happens. Let's jump into the world building. So third book in this series, there's already been a ton of world building and setup to get to this point. We have, a world where we have people with powers called Grisha. We have the Darkling. He kind of has the power of darkness. That's his power. And then we have Alina, who's the yang to his yang, or vice versa. She's the light. We have a bunch of Grisha characters, and we have our country, Ravka, that's kind of been divided into. So in this world where we have our Grisha and people that are non-Grisha, the second army and the first army, they are basically in a war now for like the entire country, possibly even the entire world if the dark side, or the darkness, continues to grow in power like they did in the previous book. So Alina is with her group of followers now. They think that she's a saint because she has this special light power that no one else has. But in order to get even more powerful, Alina is after this Firebird, because legend has it that the Firebird will be able to give her the third amplifier, they call it, she needs to complete her set. So in book 1 we had the Stag, that was one amplifier, and then in book 2 we had the Sea Whip, that was the second amplifier, and then the third is going to be the Firebird. And I do like the whole setup of the fact that there's one kind of magic, which is lightness, and then we have this other, the reverse side of magic. They call it Mervost. I can't pronounce it. If you've read the book, you'll know what I mean. But basically, it's the power over life and death, and it's a power that no one should have. But Alina is trying to get that power because she thinks that is what she needs to defeat the Darkling and his dark army and the darkness and all the dark things. She thinks she needs to use dark to defeat dark. So that's kind of the setup of this book. The world building, I would say the lore in this particular volume is expanded by the time we get to the end, but I can't really go into that without talking about spoilers. So all I will say for this non-spoiler part is that any questions that you had in the previous books about, the dark side of magic and the amplifiers and all of that stuff thankfully gets answered by the end of book 1. So that part is really, really good. So now I'm going to move on and talk about some of our characters, starting with our main character, Alina. I thought Alina was okay in book 1, but my biggest issue with Alina is that she was a total blank slate. She had no really good defining characteristics. She didn't have good hopes and dreams. She was just very one note, very even keel, and that continued in book 2. And I feel in book 3, though, we get a little bit more from her. It's not enough to make her, a super awesome character, but I did feel that she at least completes the arc of her journey in a way that was interesting to me anyway. So, Alina Starkov, she was okay in the beginning, did not like her in book 2, liked her much more better in book 3. She starts out in kind of not a great spot. By the time where she ends up though, I think is appropriate for her and appropriate for her journey. So I'm okay with where she went and where she ended up. And that brings me to my least favorite character, who is Mal. So if you've read the first 2 books, Mal is Alina's childhood friend. He seemed like he didn't like her in book 1, but then wanted her because someone else wanted her. And then in book 2, he was totally annoying. Oh my god, I could not stand him. So by the time we come around to book 3, obviously going into this book, Mal is probably my least favorite of the characters. And coming out of book 3, I will say He's still probably my least favorite character, but that being said, I will say that Mal, compared to the other books, has his own arc in this book, which was much more than we've ever gotten from him before. It's always been all about Alina, and I think what book three does really well is it gave arcs to a lot of characters. So not just Alina, but Mal, and even some of the secondary characters like Genya, David, Zoya, Nikolai, who's one of my favorites. They all have their own arcs in this book, which are really, really great. So going back to Mal really quick, I don't like Mal because he was like a pathetic puppy in the second book. He was just following Alina around. He didn't seem like he had his own brain, his own thoughts. He just did whatever she told him to do and lived for her and blah, 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 blah. And we still get some of that in book three. But again, Mal does have his own story arc here, and where he starts and where he ends made me appreciate the character a little bit more. Still my least favorite, but I did not absolutely hate him like I did in book two. I just mildly dislike him now, so mildly dislike him. I'm okay with where he ended up. I'm okay with what happened to him. And I will mention one plot thing here, again, being a bit vague, but there is a point in the story where there is a really big twist that involves Mal, and I feel like that twist should have had like a really big emotional impact, but because I don't like Mal and I don't like his character and I'm not invested in his story, I didn't really care so much about the twist. I was like, meh, okay, that's nice, makes sense, makes him, I guess, more important to the story, and that's about it. So those are our two main people on the side of light, Alina and Mal. And then we have the Darkling on the other side. And I was very disappointed in book two that we did not get to see the Darkling a lot. But thankfully, he is back in book three. Still not enough, as I would like to see, because I like the Darkling. I think he's a great villain. But he was in this book a little bit, so we got to see a little bit more of him. I really like the connection that the Darkling and Alina have. I don't mean romantically, because he's a villain and she's the hero. I get it. But I do think that they do have this connection because they are both unique. And the Darkling always says to her, like, there's no one else like us out there. And that's true. And so to him, I could really understand what the Darkling was thinking and what he was feeling and what he was trying to accomplish. The best villains are always the ones that you can understand, and I did understand the Darkling. And I love seeing him in this book. His name finally gets revealed in this book. If you saw the Shadow and Bone TV show, they revealed it like episode 1. I don't even think they called him the Darkling in the show now that I think about it. But in the book, he's always been the Darkling up until this point. It's only in this book that we get to learn his name. It's only in this book that we get to learn a little bit more about his history, his family history, who he's related to, who his mother's related to, and all that stuff was super, super fascinating, super great. Darkling continues to be one of my favorite characters. Some of my other favorite characters in this book, like I mentioned previously, are Genya. I love Genya. She has a great arc in this book. Zoya, I didn't really care about her before, but she has a pretty good arc in this book. And Nikolai. I love Nikolai. Nikolai was the only thing that saved book 2 for me. I loved Nikolai. I loved his character. He has an amazing arc in this book. And something that I didn't realize, they actually, well, I guess I'll talk about this when we come to the plot. So I'm still going to talk about Nikolai, but also moving on to the plot section here. At the end of the book, after Nikolai has his arc, which is a super cool arc, by the way, not something I was expecting, total big twist, absolutely loved it. And where he ends up at the end of this book leaves the door open for further stories. I've always known that there were more books in the Grishaverse. There is the, Six of Crows duology. There's the King of Scars duology. Other than the Crow one I had heard about, and obviously I've seen the Crows in the TV show, I actually have King of Scars, had no idea what it's about, but apparently it's about Nikolai, which is super exciting, super, super cool. You'll realize once you get to the end of the book, like, where that story is going to go. I am so excited about that. So the plot of Ruin and Rising, like I've already said, is Alina going out after this Firebird to try and get her third amplifier so that she can use it to defeat the Darkling. And along the way, there are a bunch of twists and turns. Some I've already talked about, twists that should have big emotional impacts. One involved Mal. That one didn't really get me so much. There are a couple involving some of the other characters, like Bagra. There's a bit of a twist with her. That one I really liked. Nikolai, there's a bit of a twist with him that I really liked. But in general, I think compared to the previous book, this plot moves along at a pretty good pace. I'd say in the beginning, like, the action picks up, like, right away. Maybe by, like, the second or third chapter, things start moving. So even though the book starts out, like, in a really, like, dull pace, it picks up and it keeps going and it never really slows down until the end. I think there were 18 chapters in this book. I had a hard time putting it down. It was super easy just to keep going. Tons of action, tons of adventure. Way more stuff happened in this book than in the previous book. And I think maybe even in the previous two books. So there was more plot packed into this one book than the previous two books combined. So I believe that makes Ruin and Rising probably my favorite book of this series. Those are my non-spoiler thoughts about Ruin and Rising. Now I'm just going to talk about some spoilers for the whole series overall, so if you haven't read it and you don't want to be spoiled, now is your time to click away, come back later when you've read the book, read the series. 3, 2, 1. If you're still here and you want to talk spoilers, wow. Let me just say, I wish that when Alina had stabbed Mal that he had stayed dead. I know that's a horrible thing for me to say. I don't like Mal. I just don't like him. And the twist about him being the third amplifier, yes, I think that definitely helped make his character more meaningful and more important. But at the time when that happened in the plot, I already didn't care about him, and I had already written him off, so I didn't really care when that happened. The only part of me that cared is like, oh, what's this gonna do to Alina? Like, how is she gonna suffer? How is she gonna be able to make the decision to kill him and take the power that she's been looking for? I don't know. So again, I thought it was a nice twist for Mal to have that happen to him, but I personally could have cared less about it. But the Nikolai thing, I did care about, and I did absolutely love that. I loved Nikolai and how he got turned into the darkness demon monster, and I like that he still has scars left over from that. And at the end of the book, where they referred to him as the King of Scars, I went, wait a minute, isn't that the title of one of the other books in the Grishaverse? I had no idea that King of Scars was about Nikolai, but now that I know that, I am super excited to read that book because Nikolai was one of my favorite characters in here. So then there's the whole thing about Bagra and the Darkling Alexander being descendants of what's his name there? The Mervost guy. I'm blanking on his name for a minute. But you know what I mean, amplifier guy. I thought that was interesting. But again, I don't know. I guess that one didn't really affect me either. I think, again, it was supposed to be one of these big twists, but I was like, okay, whatever. Didn't really care about it. Didn't affect me at all. So if someone was really into this book, I can see how some of those twists might make it a little bit more exciting. So it didn't make the book more exciting for me. It just made it more interesting, I will say. Ooh, that's interesting. So anyway, those are just a couple little things I wanted to say because I literally just finished this book this morning. They're fresh on my mind. I wanted to talk about it. So those are my thoughts on Ruin and Rising. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel. I do new videos every Sunday, Wednesday, and sometimes on Friday. Happy reading, everyone!